Schmidt, the Executive Director for the State Board of Education. Today is my last day, so Alicia Williams will be helping you out at future meetings. But I thought what we could do is introduce ourselves, and then we can, first of all, we'll do a roll call, and then we'll introduce ourselves.
Member Aragon?
My name is Joshua Aragon. I'm a teacher in the Tempe Elementary School District. I teach special education at Fees College Preparatory Middle School.
Member Garcia?
I'm Marisol Garcia, and I am a middle school social studies teacher out of the Isaac School District and member of the Certification Advisory Committee.
Member Maurer?
I am Terry Maurer, represent the Arizona Department of Education. I work in Title II.
Member Peasley?
Kimberly Peasley, or Kim Peasley, and I am a retired special educator, special education administrator. I currently chair the Certification Advisory Committee and work in the special education field as a consultant and specialist.
Member Righty? Members of the committee, you have a quorum.
Okay, thank you. So members, what we wanted to do was just gather you and give you some introductory information about the task that are ahead of you as members of this committee. What changes last legislation with 1042, Senate Bill 1042, the alternative education preparation program approval process is to look very different than the traditional educator preparation program approval process. So what we did was we had a conforming rule change that was adopted by the board that also provided for the creation of this committee to review applications submitted by alternative education preparation program providers. And so what we wanted to do with you today was go over your role in reviewing those applications and see if you had any questions. And then we'll have you start that review process on your own. And then we'll look for a date about 30 days out to regroup the committee and have discussions about the scoring that they came up with. Does that sound okay to everybody?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And was everybody able to access the link that I provided them for the application that was submitted by Teachers of Tomorrow?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So, and if are either of you watching on live streaming?
No, I did not go there yet. I can.
Okay, if you want to watch on live streaming, because we do have the application pulled up and we can kind of go through some of the aspects of the application. If you go to our home site, which is azsbe.az.gov, in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a click that will take you directly to the live streaming. So do you want to do that now? We can give you a moment to do that.
It's pulling up. Let me see. Yeah, I'm there. Thank you.
Marisol's waving to you.
Hi.
And Josh, are you able to access that? Or Member Aragon, sorry.
Yes, I'm there.
Okay, great. So I thought what I do...
Hi.
And you may want to mute your phone so we don't get a feedback on the echo. And then if you have questions, then just unmute it. So I just want to show you what's involved in the application process, and then we can take some questions. So on the first page, they give background information. And then on the first scoring area that you're going to come to is regarding the budget of the program. All of the items within the submission, you will score somewhere between 0 and 3 points. So if there's no evidence about that expectation, you give them a 0. If there's limited evidence addressing the expectation, you give them a 1. If they provide acceptable evidence that the expectation is met, you give them a 2. If they provide evidence that's beyond acceptable on the expectation, then you give them a 3. And you can deal with the prompt as being the expectation. So does anyone have any questions so far?
Can I ask a logistical question? Sure. When we complete the rubric, we don't complete it in the Google Doc, right? We have a separate rubric or do we complete it in the Google Doc?
We could, we have not, Member Garcia, we haven't created a separate scoring document, so we could get one to the committee of that. That's just the prompt with the scoring, if that would be helpful.
Yeah, that way we're not writing on each.
Okay. Yeah. So then, so under financial stability, what you would do is you would read the information that's provided, and then you would score that between a 0 and a 3. And then at the end of each prompt, you're provided with the little mini scoring area for each one of those prompts. The other thing is if you feel like there's insufficient information provided, then you could type notes in here and request additional information. Any questions so far? So then what the next series of the prompts do is they each one of the in-task standards are set forth separately. There's 10 standards, and these are the standards regarding the expectations of teachers and also for our teacher preparation programs under board rule. This is the board rule where we get this from. So what it does is it states each standard, and you can treat that as the expectation. And then what they do is they provide a narrative of how their program addresses this criteria. And then at the end of standard 1, you'll see that there's a prompt, or there's a scoring prompt for you. So you would again score standard 1, 0 to 3. Do you see that? Mm-hmm. And then you would ask for additional information. Now, the other thing that happens within each one of these is you have links to documents that are evidence of that, of meeting that standard. So for standard 1 and the standards that follow, they have two things that they're doing. They're showing where this standard was either introduced or reinforced within their program, and then they're showing where it's assessed. So if you were to click on this link, then they will show you the assessment that actually assesses that standard and the criteria that's used in grading that assessment. So again, this would just relate to standard 1. And then again, the left-hand column, they're giving descriptions of how standard 1 is either introduced or reinforced within the program. And that could also include links to those actual assignments, or they could just include a narrative of the assignment while the right-hand column is linking you to actual assessments of that standard. Any questions so far?
Yes, I do have. This is Kim Peasley, and I did have a question about the hours. I read that in their proposal, but I didn't see that there was a way to identify how many actual hours of instruction the students would be receiving. It said a module is 45 hours of instruction, and then the unit, but it did not, in the course description, didn't tell us how many hours. Did I miss that somewhere?
Member Peasley, no, and I don't believe that's a requirement. Part of what the intent of SB 1042 was, not only would the approval process look different, but the actual program would look different too. And it's not only that they look different, that they look substantially different. So your focus is more not on the hours, but whether or not, in regards to these specific standards or any part of the application, whether or not they've submitted sufficient evidence of that requirement being met. And then you score each one of those sections from a 0 to a 3. Other questions? So what you're going to see is this is going to repeat for every one of the 10 in-task standards. Right. So these are all the things that apply to standard 2, then we go into learning environments. Same thing, anytime you see one of these links, it'll actually take you to that actual document that will support the submission, either with what the assignment is or the assessment.
I went through maybe a little over a third of this application, including the links, and they do have, in terms of special education, they've got Texas terminology. So would that be a place for us to note on the scoring profile that needed to change that to Arizona language?
Yeah, so you could make that recommendation as a reviewer. So after each section, you have where you're going to score it, and then you can request additional information, and you can make recommendations here too.
Okay.
So if
thank you, Marisol, for making the recommendation for a scoring sheet.
Yes.
All to you.
I had one ready, but I thought it might make more sense to actually walk you through it first than handing you the scoring sheet first.
Could it have room for notes as well?
Yeah, it does. What I really did was I took all of these and put them into a separate document. So you'll have all of that in front of you. So then it just proceeds on. So standard 4 deals with the content knowledge, same type of thing. Here's the standard and expectation, and then they're going to provide you a narrative as to how that standard's met within the program, and then the split columns where it's introduced or reinforced, and then where it's assessed. So this process just continues on through the 10 standards, and then after each standard, you're going to rate those 0 to 3, and then provide any comments that you want to. So any questions on any of that?
No.
Okay. Is it okay if we skip ahead to the next section?
Mm-hmm. Fine with me.
Josh, are you okay with that? Remember Aragon, I'm sorry.
Sounds great. Josh.
Okay.
This is your last day. We're all friends now.
Okay. We're still on live streaming, so.
Excuse me.
So, oops, I went too far down.
I know I had a question. We've done a lot of work on the course requirements. Will there also be a companion document that would give us the list of requirements for each of the certifications?
Member Peasley, so when we did that work with the Certification Advisory Committee on those requirements, those went to traditional programs. So we're required under state law for the alternative programs to look substantially different. They do provide alignment to the in-task standards, which is what we just went through. They do have to provide a budget. We can give you a list of things that are required under board rule and based on these programs. Yes, so that could serve as your checklist. And that's really what these prompts are derived from. So then the next thing after, so they told us in the beginning about their program. They told us about the budget, financial implications. They went through each one of the in-task standards. Now they're going to talk about the application review process for the people enrolling in the program. And again, these are all live links. So they're giving, if you want to access the student handbook, you can. Other requirements about people entering the program, these are from the program provider. That's what they're requiring. They talk about a screening tool, letter of acceptance, enrollment, agreement, statement of academic integrity. So these are all documents that you can link on and review. This is a lot simpler digital. Before I worked for the board, when I was on one of the review teams, we used to get binders of hard copies of all of this that were about 8 inches tall, so this is a lot more helpful. And then, so again, at each section, you'll get an opportunity to score at 0 to 3 and ask for any other additional information. They're required to provide enrollment forms and descriptions, so you see that. These are all the documents that they provided that you can review. They're going to describe relationships that they have with districts and school participants. So those are all listed. They'll have a narrative about the length of time the candidate is required to participate in supervised school-based experiences, including any orientation. So we have a narrative here about that. Again, then you would score it. If you want more information, you can ask for it. They're going to talk about how the candidates are actually supervised and evaluated, as well as how that school-based experience is structured. And that the person supervising the candidate has to be an effective or highly effective teacher. So they will give you a description here. And remember, Peasley, I know you asked about hours, so then they have some descriptions in here about hours, although we don't have a specific requirement in board rule about that, but they have provided you with information about the clock hours and the different phases of the program.
Right, for the total.
Correct.
I saw that. Thank you.
Here they're describing the roles of the program supervisor. So again, and then you would score the section again, 0 to 3. Any additional information that you may want, you can list there. The other thing, too, is if you feel like, anytime one of these programs you think has done an excellent job in providing information, you can also provide a commendation to that organization. That's always helpful to that group to know that they're on track with meeting expectations. Now they explain how that school-based experience is going to promote the effectiveness of the candidates. So we have a description of that. So you'll score that section. They have to provide the forms for the school-based experience. Those are all there, and then you're going to score that section. They're describing the staff that will be working with the program provider and what their credentials are and their different roles. So those are all listed. You'll score that section. Time to complete the program. So based on board rule, the candidates should be able to complete the program within a year, but not more than 3 years. So there's a description about that. And then you'll score that. The next one is how the candidate will be evaluated and the tracking of that candidate's progress in the program. So they provide information on that, and you'll score that. Again, there's live links here. So these are about the field supervisor. This shows, so if the field supervisor goes out to observe and evaluate the candidate, this gives you what domains they're going to be evaluating on and samples of comments they made on a sample candidate. Oops. And then the next section, we talked about that, tracking and evaluation. The other section that's here is about the program itself. How will you evaluate the program and the program's success? So they'll provide information about their own continuous improvement and evaluation of the program itself. Same thing there, then you will rate that. If you need additional information, you can request it. So that's it at a pretty high level. So I think 2 documents we could get to use: a copy of the board rule, which will sort of act as a checklist of criteria that they should meet, which again I think is how this whole application form was devised, was it took each one of those criteria and made a prompt. And then the other thing is we can give you just the scoring sections for each one of the sections, just the scoring template.
Okay, my concern was that because my field is not secondary general education, I am not familiar with the course requirements for social studies and geography and dance and fine arts, and so I just was looking for a way to measure those courses that they have, or the modules that they meet the criteria, and that'll be in board rule for each of those certificates.
So,
or do they just?
So, Member Peasley, I think a couple of things to keep in mind in connection with this program. It will be offered to individuals who already hold a bachelor's degree. So the possibility exists that they already hold a bachelor's degree in that content area.
Okay.
And then if they don't, then there's always testing requirements that would attach to individuals who don't have a degree in that content area.
Got it.
So generally, these are going to be more focused on pedagogy than on content.
Thank you.
Member Aragon, did you have any questions?
No, I feel like everything makes pretty good sense to me.
Okay. Anybody else? Member Garcia or Mar? Okay. Okay, so we will get a copy of the board rule to you, and then we will also just get a scoring template. I don't really have anything else for you today. I think the only other thing would be if we could pick a targeted date roughly about 30 days out where the group could reconvene and then share their scoring. I think the other thing to remember is under open meeting law, you cannot discuss this with a quorum outside of a public meeting. So it would be okay for Member Garcia if she has a question to ask Member Mora, but you can't collectively talk to a quorum outside of public meeting. Everybody understand that?
Right. Yes.
Okay. So 30 days from today would... Well, here's the other thing I want to put before the group is the board has a board meeting on December 4th. So I think part of what we want to keep in mind, do you think realistically that this group can do this review and make a recommendation to the board prior to the December 4th meeting? With the understanding we do have to back up the timeline a little bit because board staff would have to get the information to the board.
Mm-hmm. So what is our date that there would have to be a decision?
I think what board staff could do potentially is if the group thinks that they could have a recommendation, we could put this as a placeholder on the agenda. And then if the committee could convene like the week of November 27th or sooner, then that could have enough time to get the information to the board before the board meeting so they could study it.
Well, the week of the 20th is Thanksgiving week.
Correct. So I don't know if like the following Monday or Tuesday might be a possibility.
Mondays and Tuesdays and Wednesdays for me are now exceptionally poor. Thursdays and Fridays are the best. And November 30th, December 1st are open for me at this point.
November 30th and and December 1st also look okay for me.
Can we shoot for November 30th then?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would give enough time then that staff, if you convened on the 30th, then staff could compile that information and get that to the board the following Friday for a board vote on the following Monday. So is mornings or afternoons better?
Afternoons are better for me on Thursdays.
Can we do 1 o'clock on the 30th?
Yes.
So I think so. Then the expectation on the 30th would be to bring back the scoring sheets, and then any comments, and then I think what we would have the new director do then is get a sense of a consensus from the group as to a recommendation for the board at that meeting. So you would have the opportunity on the 30th to talk through all your scoring and findings. So I would think maybe an hour for that meeting, depending on your thoughts. It might run an hour and a half, but I think if there's a certain consensus that emerges early, it may be about an hour.
Okay.
Sound okay? And it's the same thing. You can attend in person or telephonically.
Okay.
Does that sound good to everyone?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Normally we elect chairs and co-chairs, but since I think this committee will just be convened as needed, maybe we can disperse with that for right now, if that's okay.
I agree.
Okay. Okay, well, very good. If there's nothing else, then we're set for the 30th at 1 p.m. I'll get a copy of the board rule to you as well as the scoring template, and happy reading.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Much.
All right, we're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Will Alicia let us know where the meeting is?
It'll probably be the same place. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Take care now. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.